I was brushing my teeth when it happened. Nothing dramatic, nothing that should matter. Just me standing in my bathroom at 6:47 a.m. on a Tuesday, doing what millions of people do every morning, mindlessly going through the motions of being alive. My reflection stared back at me like it always did. Same tired eyes, same dark circles from sleeping poorly, same chipped tooth I kept meaning to get fixed. And then my reflection blinked before I did. I stopped moving. The toothbrush stayed frozen in my mouth. I watched her, my face, my body, my entire physical existence, blink slowly, deliberately, like she was checking to see if I was paying attention. And I was. I was absolutely, completely paying attention. I blinked. My reflection didn't move. She just stared at me with an expression I didn't recognize on my own face. It was patient, knowing, like she was waiting for me to figure something out that I should have already understood. I dropped my toothbrush. It clattered against the sink and I jerked back from the mirror. When I looked again, there I was. Just me, normal, regular. My reflection moving in perfect synchronization with my movements, the way it always had, the way it should. But I knew what I'd seen. I didn't go to work that day. I called in sick, which wasn't a lie because I was starting to feel genuinely ill. That nauseated, disoriented feeling you get when your brain encounters something it can't process. I sat on my couch and I told myself there had to be an explanation. A neurological glitch. A moment of dissociation. Low blood sugar. Too much caffeine. Anything but what my gut was screaming at me. Something was deeply, fundamentally wrong. I went back to the mirror. For the next 3 hours, I stood in that bathroom conducting what I can only describe as an obsessive experiment. I moved my left arm. My reflection moved her left arm. I stuck out my tongue. She stuck out her tongue. I did jumping jacks. She did jumping jacks. Everything was synchronized perfectly. Everything was exactly as it should be, except I couldn't shake the memory of that blink. The independent, intentional, deliberate blink that came before mine. By afternoon, I'd convinced myself I'd imagined it. By evening, I was less sure. I started researching. I typed into Google, reflection moves independently, mirror glitch, seeing yourself move differently. Is this a sign of psychosis? The internet offered me nothing but conspiracy theories and Reddit threads written by people who sounded exactly as unhinged as I was starting to feel. The next morning, I saw it happen again. This time I was in my bedroom. I'd caught sight of myself in the full-length mirror by my closet. My reflection smiled, but I wasn't smiling. My face was completely neutral, and the smile on her face was wrong. Not cruel, but definitely not mine. It was the kind of smile someone gives you when they know something you don't. I ran out of my apartment. I drove to my sister's house without calling first. She opened the door looking annoyed, which is her default state when I show up unannounced. I think something is wrong with me, I said without preamble. Neurologically, psychologically, something. I need to talk to someone. My sister Jennifer looked concerned in the way you look concerned when someone you love says something that scares you. She made me tea. She asked me about my sleeping habits, my stress levels, whether I'd been using any new medications. She suggested it might be anxiety. She suggested it might be depression. She did not suggest, thank God, that I was losing my mind. But I could see it in her eyes, the calculation happening behind her carefully composed expression. She was already preparing for the possibility. I didn't tell her about the mirror. I couldn't. The moment I said the words out loud, it became real in a way that felt irrevocable. As long as I kept it to myself, I could still pretend it was a glitch, a malfunction, something temporary. But once I told someone else, once I gave it language and shape and substance, I'd be admitting that my reality had cracked. I went home and I started researching doppelgangers. Not the mythological kind, though. I went down that rabbit hole for a while. But the real ones, the scientific explanations. Capgras syndrome, when you believe people you know have been replaced by identical imposters. Hyodoscopy, seeing your own double. Depersonalization and derealization, feeling disconnected from your body and your reality. There were so many ways that a mind could fracture, so many ways that perception could lie. That night I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed with my phone in my hand, Googling symptoms, reading medical journals, watching videos from people who'd experienced what I was experiencing. And the more I read, the more convinced I became that I was having a mental health crisis. That whatever was happening inside my head, not in the objective reality of my apartment. So I did what you do when you're scared. I called a therapist. I made an appointment for the following week. I told her in that careful way you talk when you're afraid of being committed to a psychiatric hospital, that I'd been having some unusual perceptual experiences. She nodded and wrote things down and suggested that I was probably experiencing stress-induced dissociation. She recommended meditation. She asked if I wanted to talk about what might be causing the stress. She didn't use the word crazy, but I heard it anyway. A week passed, then 2 weeks. The incidents with the mirror continued. Sometimes my reflection moved before I did. Sometimes it smiled when I wasn't smiling. Sometimes it looked at me with expressions I'd never made. Anger, contempt, exhaustion deeper than anything I'd ever felt. But I was becoming increasingly convinced that none of it was real, that my mind was manufacturing these moments, these memories of wrongness, and that I was slowly, quietly, losing my grip on reality. Then, on a Saturday night, I saw her doing something I wasn't doing. I was sitting on my couch, just sitting there in the dark, watching TV with the volume off. My apartment was quiet. The only light came from the television, a flickering blue glow that illuminated everything in sickly shadows, and I caught my reflection in the dark TV screen across the room. Except my reflection was moving. She was reaching for something I couldn't see. Her mouth was moving like she was speaking, saying words I couldn't hear. I jumped up. The reflection stopped. Everything went back to normal. And that's when something crystallized in my mind. Either I was insane, or someone was deliberately making me think I was insane. And I realized that one of those options was infinitely more terrifying than the other. I started looking around my apartment differently. I started thinking about who had keys, who had access. I looked at the corners of my rooms, the shadows where a camera might hide. I checked my apartment for listening devices like I was some kind of spy in a bad movie. I examined my mirrors from every angle, looking for seams, for gaps, for any evidence that what I was seeing wasn't my own reflection but someone else's. And then, late on a Sunday night, I found something. It was behind my bedroom mirror, a tiny irregularity in the backing, a spot where the adhesive had come slightly loose. I pulled at it carefully, my heart pounding, and the entire mirror came away from the wall. And there it was, a small camera, no bigger than a button, positioned perfectly to capture everything on my side of the glass. I staggered backward. The room started spinning. All of it made sense now. All of it clicked into place like a puzzle I'd been trying to assemble in the dark, suddenly illuminated. The blinks that weren't mine, the smiles that weren't mine, the moments when my reflection moved independently. They weren't hallucinations. They weren't dissociative episodes. They were someone else. Someone who'd been watching me through that mirror for God knows how long. Someone who'd been deliberately creating these moments to gaslight me, to make me question my sanity, to make me doubt my own reality. But the worst part, the thing that made my knees buckle, was that I immediately knew who it was. My roommate, Marcus. Not really my roommate anymore, actually. He'd moved out 3 months ago. We'd dated for 2 years. We'd broken up badly. He'd wanted to stay friends. I'd said I needed space. He'd understood. Or at least he'd said he understood. He'd helped me move into this apartment 6 months ago. He'd helped me hang the mirrors. He'd had access to my space, to my life, to the most intimate moments of my existence. And he'd been watching me. The revelation didn't hit me like a brick. It hit me like standing still while the world dropped away beneath my feet. I sat on the floor of my bedroom for 3 hours holding that tiny camera, trying to reconcile 2 versions of reality. The one where I was gradually losing my mind, and the one where I'd been deliberately, systematically manipulated by someone I'd loved. I went through my apartment. I found 3 more cameras. One in the bathroom, angled at the mirror above the sink. One in my bedroom, directed at my bed. One in the living room, positioned to capture the full-length mirror by my closet. Each one carefully placed, each one strategically positioned. Each one aimed at a reflective surface. He wasn't watching me. He was watching my reflection. He was creating moments of impossible disconnection between my image and my body. He was making me believe I was seeing someone else wearing my face because he wanted me to question my sanity. He wanted me to feel what he felt. Abandoned, betrayed, forgotten. I called the police. An officer came to my apartment. He looked at the cameras. He looked at me. He looked at me the same way my therapist had looked at me, with a mixture of concern and doubt. "Do you have proof of who installed these?" he asked. "Do you have any evidence that this person had malicious intent?" I didn't. Marcus could claim he'd forgotten he installed them. He could claim it was a joke. He could claim that he'd meant to tell me and forgot. The evidence was circumstantial. The motive was murky. And without catching him in the act, without him confessing, without some definitive proof, there wasn't much they could do. But I knew. I'd always known. From the moment I found that first camera, I'd known it was him. I drove to his apartment. I didn't call first. I just showed up, still holding that button camera, still running on adrenaline and rage and something that felt dangerously close to vindication. He answered the door like he'd been expecting me, which, looking back, I realize he probably had been. He'd been waiting for me to find the cameras. He'd probably wanted me to find them. "You've been watching me," I said. Just like that. No preamble. No accusation wrapped in politeness. Just the raw truth. He didn't deny it. He just looked at me with an expression of such sadness that for a moment, I almost felt sorry for him. "You wouldn't listen to me," he said. "I tried to talk to you. I tried to explain how much I was hurting. You just wouldn't listen. So you decided to spy on me, to gaslight me, to make me think I was losing my mind. I didn't make you think anything," he said coldly. "I just helped you see what was really happening." "What was really happening?" I demanded. "Marcus, you were manipulating me. You were deliberately—" "I was showing you the truth," he interrupted. His voice had changed. It was harder now, sharper. "The truth that you've always been someone else, that you've never been who you pretended to be. I was just making it visible." I felt something crack in me, not my sanity. That was solid now. That was confirmed. But something deeper, the last thread of connection I'd been holding on to, the part of me that wanted to believe he'd done this out of pain rather than malice. That thread snapped. "You're insane," I said quietly. "You know that, right? This isn't love, this isn't hurt, this is stalking, this is a crime." He smiled, and it was the exact same smile I'd seen on my face in the mirror. Patient. Knowing. "I loved you," he said. "But you were never what I needed you to be." I left his apartment. I went back to the police. I showed them the footage on my phone of his admission. I showed them the cameras. I filed a restraining order. And then I called a lawyer. The legal process was slow and infuriating. The district attorney moved cautiously, building a case that would hold up in court. But they built it. They looked at the camera placement, the duration of the surveillance, the text messages where Marcus had referenced, "making sure you see yourself clearly." They built a case for stalking, for unauthorized surveillance, for intentional infliction of emotional distress. He was convicted 6 months later. I didn't go to the trial. I couldn't face him, couldn't bear to hear him try to justify what he'd done by claiming it was about love or pain, or any of the other excuses I'm sure he'd prepared. The judge sentenced him to 2 years plus a mandatory order to stay away from me. But the real sentence was mine. I had to rebuild my relationship with reality. I had to learn to trust my perceptions again. I had to reconcile the fact that I hadn't been going insane. I'd been deliberately manipulated by someone who claimed to love me. What I learned in the months that followed was that gaslighting isn't just about lying. It's about making someone believe that their own mind is unreliable. It's about separating you from the one thing you can usually count on, your own sense of reality. It's about power and control and the desire to make someone else as broken as you feel. But I also learned that once you understand what's been done to you, once you can see the manipulation for what it is, you get your power back. You get your reality back. You get yourself back. I removed all the mirrors from my apartment, not because I was afraid of what I'd see, but because I needed to break the association between my reflection and his presence. For a long time, I couldn't look at mirrors without feeling that old paranoia creeping back in. Couldn't see my reflection without wondering if someone was on the other side, watching. But slowly, over time, I learned to look again. I learned to see my face as my own, not as a stranger, not as a duplicate, not as something I needed to fear or question. I learned that the girl I saw in the mirror was me, only me. No one else wearing my face, no one else hiding in my reflection. I still think about what Marcus said, that I'd never been what he needed me to be. And I've realized that the tragedy of that isn't about me. The tragedy is that he spent 2 years trying to make me into someone he could control, instead of accepting that I was never going to be that person. That none of us are ever going to be exactly what another person needs us to be. And that's okay. That's life. That's being human. What I learned is this. Sometimes the people closest to us are the ones who can hurt us the most. Sometimes love can transform into obsession so gradually that we don't notice the moment it happened. And sometimes, when we start to doubt our own reality, we need to ask ourselves not, am I going crazy? But who benefits from me thinking I'm going crazy? I walk past mirrors now without flinching. I look at my reflection and I see myself, fully, completely, undeniably. I see a woman who survived gaslighting and came out the other side. I see someone who learned to trust her instincts, even when everything told her not to. I see someone who reclaimed her reality and her sanity by refusing to accept someone else's version of truth. The girl in the mirror blinks only when I blink. She smiles only when I smile. She exists only as a reflection of me, nothing more, nothing less. And that, finally, is enough.